This is day 23 of Advent of Cyber 2023, and this challenge is called Relay All the Way. McSkitty is unable to authenticate to her server. It seems that McGreedy has struck again and changed the password. We know it's him since Log McBlue confirmed in the logs that there were authentication attempts on his laptop. Online brute force attacks don't seem to be working, so it's time to get creative. We know that the server has a network file share, so if we can trick McGreedy, perhaps we can get him to disclose the new password to us. Let's get to work. So the learning objectives for this challenge are to learn about the basics of network file shares, understand NTLM authentication, how NTLM authentication coercion attacks work, how Responder works for authentication coercion attacks, and forcing authentication coercion using the LNK files. So for this challenge we need to start the machine and then start the attack box. Introduction. In today's task we'll look at NTLM authentication and how threat actors can perform authentication coercion attacks. By coercing authentication, attackers can undercover sensitive information that can be used to gain access to pretty critical stuff. Stiven. Sharing is caring. We tend to think of computers as isolated devices. This may be true to an extent, but the real power of computing comes into play when we connect to networks. This is where we can start to share resources in order to achieve some pretty awesome things. In corporate environments, networks and network-based resources are used frequently. For example, in a network, there's no need for every user to have their own printer. Instead, the organization can buy a couple of large printers that all employees can share. This does not only save costs, but allows administrators to manage these systems more easily and centrally. Another example of this is file shares. Instead of each employee having local copies of files and needing to perform crazy version control when sharing files with other employees via old school methods like flash drives, the organizations can deploy a network file share. Since the files are stored in a central location, it's easy to access them and ensure everyone has the latest version to hand. Administrators can also add security to file shares to ensure that only authenticated users can access them. Additionally, access controls can be applied to ensure employees can only access specific folders and files based on their job role. However, it's the same file shares that can land an organization in hot water with red teamers. Usually, an employee has the ability to create a new network file share. Security controls are not often applied to these shares, allowing any authenticated user to access their contents. This can cause two issues. If a threat actor gains read access, they can look to exfiltrate sensitive information. In file shares of large organizations, you can often find interesting things just lying around, such as credentials or sensitive customer documents. If the threat actor gains write access, they could alter information stored in the share, potentially overriding critical files or staging other attacks, as we'll see in this task. Before we can perform any of these attacks, we first need to understand how authentication works for network file shares. So, NTLM authentication. In day 11, we learned about Active Directory and Kerberos authentication. File shares are often used on servers and workstations to connect to an AD domain. This allows AD to take care of access management for the file share. Once connected, it's not only local users on the host who will have access to the file share, all AD users with permissions will have access to. Similar to what we saw on day 11, Kerberos authentication can be used to access these file shares. However, we'll be focusing on the other popular authentication protocol, NetNTLM or NTLM authentication. So before we dive into NTLM authentication, we should first talk about the service message block protocol. The SMB protocol allows clients, like workstations, to communicate with a server, like a file share. In networks that use Microsoft AD, SMB governs everything from inter-network file sharing to remote administration. Even the out-of-paper alert your computer receives when you try to print a document is the work of the SMB protocol. However, the security of earlier versions of the SMB protocol was deemed insufficient. Several vulnerabilities and exploits were discovered that could be leveraged to recover credentials or even gain code execution on devices. Although some of these vulnerabilities were resolved in newer versions of the protocol, legacy systems don't support them, so organizations rarely enforce their use. NetNTLM, often referred to as Windows Authentication, or just NTLM Authentication, allows the application to play the role of a middleman between the client and AD. NetNTLM is a very popular authentication protocol in Windows, and is used for various different services, including SMB and RDP. It is used in AD environments as it allows servers to pass the buck to AD for authentication. So let's take a look at how it works with the animation below. So the user sends a request, the server sends a challenge, the user responds to the challenge, the server then sends a challenge to the domain controller, DC compares challenge, and then server sends response. When a user wants to authenticate to a server, the server responds with a challenge. The user can then encrypt the challenge using the password, not the actual password, but the hash derived from the password, to create a response that is sent back to the server. The server then passes both the challenge and the response to the domain controller. Since it knows the user's password hash, it can verify the response. If the response is correct, the domain controller can notify the server that the user has been successfully authenticated and that the server can provide access. This prevents the application or server from having to store the user's credentials, which are now securely and exclusively stored on the domain controller. Here's the trick. If we could intercept these authentication requests and challenges, we could leverage them to gain unauthorized access. So let's dive in a bit deeper. Responding to the race. There are usually lots of authentication requests and challenges flying around on the network. A popular tool that can be used to intercept them is Responder. Responder allows us to perform man-in-the-middle attacks by poisoning the response during NetNTLM authentication, tricking the client into talking to you instead of the actual server they want to connect to. On a real LAN, Responder will attempt to poison any link local multicast name resolution (LLMNR), NetBIOS name service, and web proxy auto discovery requests that are detected. On large Windows networks, these protocols allow hosts to perform their own local DNS resolution for all hosts on the same local network. Rather than overburdening network resources, such as the DNS servers, first, hosts can attempt to determine if the host they are looking for is on the same local network by sending out LLMNR requests and seeing if any host responds. The MBTNS is a precursor protocol to LLMNR, and WPAD requests are made to try to find a proxy for future HTTPS requests. Connections. Since these protocols rely on requests broadcasted on the local network, our rogue device running Responder would receive them too. They would usually just be dropped since they were not meant for our host. However, Responder will actively listen to the request and send poison responses telling the requesting host that our IP is associated with a requested hostname. By poisoning these requests, Responder attempts to force the client to connect to our attack box. In the same line, it starts to host several servers such as SMB, HTTP, SQL, and others to capture these requests and force authentication. If you want to dive a bit deeper into using Responder for these poisoning attacks, have a look at the Breaching Active Directory Tracking Room. This was an incredibly popular red teaming technique to perform when it was possible to gain access to an office belonging to the target corporation. Simply plugging in a rogue network device and listening with Responder for a couple of hours would often yield several challenges that could then be cracked offline or relayed. Then the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden, being in the office was no longer cool. Most employees connected from home using a VPN. While this was great for remote working, it meant intercepting NTLM challenges was no longer really viable. Users connecting via VPN made it borderline impossible to intercept and poison LLMNR requests in a timely manner using Responder. Now we have to get a lot more creative, a little something called coercion. Unconventional coercion. If you can't just listen to and poison requests, we just have to create our own. This brings a new attack vector into the spotlight, coercion. Instead of waiting for a request, we coerce a system or service to authenticate us, allowing us to receive the challenge. Once we get this challenge, based on certain conditions, we can aim to perform two main attacks. If the password of the account coerced to authenticate is weak, we can crack the corresponding NetNTLM challenge offline using tools such as Hashcat or John the Ripper. If the server or service's security configuration is insufficient, we could attempt to relay the challenge in order to impersonate the authenticating account. Two incredibly popular versions of coerced authentication are Principal and Petit Potam. Principaller is an attack that coerces the Principal servers on Windows hosts to authenticate to a host of your choosing. Petit Potam is similar but leverages a different issue to coerce authentication. In these cases, it's the machine account, the actual server computer, that performs the authentication. Normally, machine account passwords are random and change every 30 days, so there isn't really a good way for us to crack the challenge. However, often we can relay this authentication attempt. By coercing a very privileged server, such as a domain controller, and then relaying the authentication attempt, an attacker could compromise not just a single server but all of AD. If you are interested in learning more about these coercion attacks, have a look at the Exploiting Active Directory room. So, coercing the connectee. For this task, we'll focus a bit more on coercing users into authenticating to us. Since users often have weak passwords, with this approach, we have a much higher chance of cracking one of the challenges and gaining access as the user. Users are now mostly connecting to file shares via VPN, so we can't simply run Responder and hope for the best. So the question remains, how can we coerce users to authenticate to something we control? Let's put it all together. If we have write access to a network file share, we can create a sneaky little file to coerce those users to authenticate to our server. We can do this by creating a file that, when viewed within the file browser, will coerce authentication automatically. There are many different file types that can be used for this, but they all work similarly. Coercion authentication by requesting that an element, such as the file icon, is loaded from a remote location. We will be using the NTLM theft tool to create these documents. If you are not using the attack box, you will need to download the tool first. On the attack box, we can find the tool by running the following terminal. So we'll copy that, go into our attack box, bring the command into there, then we will open a new terminal, and we will paste it in. So we're in the NTLM fifth directory, and it's got a Python script there. So for our specific example, we will create a link file using the following command. So we will copy this, and we will paste it into here, and we will need to make sure we change the attacker IP to the one that we have here. So I'm just going to copy that like so. Then we will change attacker IP here, and let's run it. Actually, I used the wrong IP there. We're meant to be using our own one, so I'm going to redo that. So minus 22.231. So we've now got that created. So create a link file in the stealthy directory named stealthy.link. So with that link, we can now authenticate. So let's check our current directory. We've got stealthy there, so cd into stealthy. Check what's in here. We've got stealthy.link. Now what we need to do is copy the commands in here. So we are connecting to the target machine with SMB, going in as guest user. Then we will do put stealthy.lnk, which will put that file up there, and then type dir to see if it's in there, which it is. So the first command will connect us to the share as a guest, the second command will upload your file, and the third command will list all files for verification. Next we need to run responder to listen for incoming authentication attempts. We can do this by running the command from a terminal window. Responder -IENS5. So we've got that in here. I'm going to open up a second terminal, so we're going to have it separate. So I think that's running as expected. So if you're not on your attack box, you'll have to change it with the adapter for your VPN connection. So let's give McGreedy a couple of minutes. He might be taking a hot chocolate break right now, but we should hear back from him in less than 5 minutes. While we wait, use your connection to the network file share to download the key list he left us as a clue using get greedy keys. Once he authenticates, you'll see the following in responder. See this. So back in here, we will do get greedy keys.txt, and I'm just going to open up another terminal to access that. So I think that would be in the cd rooms-aoc 2023 day 23-ntlm theft, and it might be in stealthy. As we see, greedy keys is there, so we'll do cat greedy keys, and we've got a bunch of stuff in here. Doesn't appear to be anything that stood out, but we'll just keep that for now. And as we can see here, I think we just got a connection from this on the SMB. It seems like we did. We've got a hash there now. Okay, so now that we have the challenge, let's try to crack it to recover the new password. As mentioned before, the challenge was encrypted with the user's NTLM hash. This NTLM hash is derived from the user's password, therefore we can perform a brute force attack on this challenge in order to recover the user's password. Copy the contents of the NTLM v2 hash to a text file called hash.txt. So let's grab all this. In the stealthy directory, let's do vim hash.txt, and we will insert that hash into there, then right quit, and we will do, using John the Ripper, we'll use the word list greedy keys.txt, and then we're going to be using it on the hash.txt. Greedy grabber 1 at is what I came up with. So after a few seconds, you should receive the password. Magic, with access gain. Take back control by using the username and password to authenticate to the host via RDP. Conclusion, coercing authentication with files is an incredible technique to have in your red team arsenal. Since the conventional responder intercepts are no longer working, this is a great way to continue intercepting authentication challenges. Plus, it goes even further. Using responder to poison requests such as LLMNR typically disrupts the normal use of network services, causing users to receive access denied messages. Using link files for coercion authentication means that we are not actually poisoning legitimate network services, but creating brand new ones. This lowers the chances of our actions being detected. Okay, so on to the questions. What is the name of the AD authentication protocol that makes use of tickets? That is Kerberos. What is the name of the AD authentication protocol that makes use of the NTLM hash? Not sure. Is it net NTLM? Yes, it is. What is the name of the tool that can intercept these authentication challenges? So, interceptor. Nope. Say intercept. Oh, responder. Responder. There we go. What is the password that McGreedy set for administrator account? That was this. We will copy that and grab that and put it here. Okay, so now we need to RDP onto the account. So we've got all this. I assume there's an application for RDP. Could it be wireless? No. System tools? Nope. Okay, to RDP, I think we need to do x3 RDP. /u administrator /p and the password greedy grabber1 1 at, and then /v 10.10.109.16 or whatever your IP address is. And I think that's it. That seems to have worked. And now we're RDPing in. So there should be a flag on the desktop, which we can see right there. So we're gonna copy this. Has that gone through here? Okay, we're just gonna type it out. thm greedy.greedy.mcnot great.steely curly brace. And there we go. That is day 23 of Advent of Cyber 23 completed. If you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe so you can watch me complete the rest of these challenges.